Over the years, I've tested more note-taking apps on iPad than I can count. Back when I was in college working toward my bachelor's in chemistry, and now as someone who uses digital planners and takes notes daily. The entirety of my channel is evident of that, and I have compared iPad note-taking apps in the past, but the landscape of note-taking apps over the years has changed so much, especially in the recent race of AI and AI features. Now, while the app you use on your iPad for note-taking is essential, today's video sponsor Paperlike has also been very crucial in my ability to take good notes on iPad. Now, I'm putting more apps head-to-head than I ever have in one video, so let's go ahead and jump right in. I used GoodNotes as my note-taking app in college. It actually was the underdog at the time. Notability was the most popular, and it was continuing to rise amongst college students taking notes on iPad. At the time, it was actually called GoodNotes 4, and then there was GoodNotes 5, and now we have GoodNotes 6. So I have really witnessed all of the massive updates to GoodNotes. So most of these comparisons will be against GoodNotes in my experience using GoodNotes. So here's a look at the interface, and here's how that compares to the interface in Notability, in Noteful, in Noteshelf, in OneNote, and in FreeNotes. One thing for certain is if you're going to make a note-taking app, maybe come up with something not involving the word note. I know it's a massive keyword for that, but it's kind of overdone right now. It's getting quite confusing at this point. While the interface apps have is largely aesthetic, it can make or break the ease and functionality of actually using the app. Out of all the interfaces of these apps, I prefer the look and feel of using GoodNotes the most over the others. I like the ability to customize my notebooks and files into folders, which I can actually customize the color and icons of. I just think it's laid out really nicely and designed really well. And while the toolbar has been redesigned and takes on a little more of a floating kind of appearance, we do have a lot more nesting of those tools. I do like that they have a more fixed toolbar compared to some of these other note-taking apps. That way, if I'm going back home or I'm changing my page templates, exporting my notes from my files, the tools right here being at the top is just really easily accessible. A good runner-up for interface to me is Noteful. They take on the same layout and kind of the same interface. Noteful feels obviously a lot more similar to GoodNotes in terms of the interface. It has those customizable folders for the color and the icons, and it is really quite similar in organization as well. And I should mention, with all of these apps, you can customize the views of your files between a list view and folders. It really just comes down to kind of the feel and the appearance here that I'm kind of comparing. OneNote obviously doesn't have visible folders. It has the tabs and notebooks for organization, but that organization might feel really intuitive to you depending on how you organize your notebooks and your files for classes and while you're taking notes. You'll notice most of the note-taking apps have some version of a floating toolbar, and many of them are actually customizable. You can customize the toolbar in GoodNotes, and you might notice it actually looks a bit different. And again, that's because I am on the beta for many new features that are launching soon, this redesigned toolbar being one of those. And of course, I'll have an entire video going in depth in all of those new features very, very soon, like next week. But anyways, you can customize the toolbar and show your most used tools in GoodNotes. You can also do that in FreeNotes, in Noteshelf, in Noteful, and Notability. In OneNote, however, you'll notice the toolbar is actually fixed and it has everything you need without the ability to customize or choose the tools and move them around. And all of these apps more or less have the same tools. Different pen tools, highlighter, laser pointer, the ability to add images, tape. They might just be laid out a little different, but they pretty much do the same things to a better or lesser degree, depending on how you compare them all together. For instance, I find the text tool in nearly all of these apps to be pretty terrible, since the focus on these apps is clearly handwriting and handwritten notes with it being on iPad. But I find the text tool in Noteful and in OneNote to be the easiest and less finicky to use out of all of the other apps. It's easy to set default fonts and edit the text to take typed notes, and just feels less frustrating with typing in general when I use Noteful or OneNote. Now, what's unique about GoodNotes is that they added a text document feature, which I haven't tested or experienced in any other note-taking app, which kind of signals a shift in wanting to be kind of this all-around note-taking app for handwriting and typed notes. You can now create a text document different from a regular note-taking page, and within this text document, you can type as you would in any other text document. They do have commands that you can access with the backslash to format your text with headings, checklists, body paragraph text, images, tables, and so on. You can still obviously add text to other document types in GoodNotes, but the text document is clearly catering towards typed notes, which you won't really see in these other iPad note-taking apps aside from maybe one, which is accessible across all of devices and all platforms, given that it is a Microsoft program and has kind of a more built-out text enrichment for these type notes. What GoodNotes and Notability don't have yet that many other note-taking apps do now, including FreeNotes and Noteful, is layers. And layers can be really beneficial for note-taking, especially if your coursework involves lots of diagrams and maps and images and things you plan to annotate or write on. You can separate your images, your highlights, your annotations, your comments from other parts of your notes through using layers. You can even show or hide layers to test yourself. And if you're big into digital planning, layers can also make it really easy to separate out the content that you add to your planner. We only see layers in FreeNotes and Noteful of the apps that I'm covering in this specific video, so layers aren't yet as mainstream in the more popular note-taking apps that we see, like GoodNotes, Notability, and OneNote. Layers is typically seen as kind of a design feature. We have layers in apps like Procreate and Illustrator and Photoshop and so on, but having used layers in Noteful and in FreeNotes, there's a lot of benefit to incorporating them in note-taking apps. A massively important feature for me in note-taking apps is the setup and flow for their reading versus editing modes. What I mean by this is how do they differentiate between me simply reading and reviewing my notes and tapping hyperlinks and using my finger within my notes, and actually writing and adding text and tapping with my pencil to add images and so on. GoodNotes, for instance, has a reading and an editing mode, but to quickly tap hyperlinks in something like my tabbed digital notebooks or in my digital planners, and even hyperlinked textbooks, I have to make sure that I am in reading mode in GoodNotes. If I am in editing mode, I won't be able to tap the hyperlinks, but I can long press on the hyperlinks if and only if I have the lasso tool selected. So a bit kind of cumbersome and just kind of a weird way of jumping between hyperlinks. In Notability, you can use your finger to tap the links within your digital planner or your hyperlinked notebooks and textbooks, but to be able to use the Apple Pencil, you'll need to switch to this finger icon. I find links to work the same way in Noteshelf. You need to make sure you're under the lasso to make it easiest to long press and jump between the hyperlinks. There's actually not even a finger to tap on like in Notability, so it's even more counterintuitive and kind of difficult to adjust to in Noteshelf specifically. Unfortunately, it's the same story in FreeNotes. I've tried numerous different ways to use the hyperlinks in this app is to make sure the pen tool is selected and then come to the lasso pen option. It's not the lasso icon like you might be used to in these other note-taking apps. And then you long press and tap the go to link prompt. I did eventually find a reading mode option in FreeNotes. You might not see it if you haven't customized your toolbar, but you can customize your toolbar to show a reading mode. That way you can quickly tap through the hyperlinks. Again, a very clunky way of doing it. In Noteful, the link system is probably the most straightforward out of all these apps. You can long press to jump within your planner, your hyperlinked notebook, your textbooks. There's not a separate editing or reading mode. The app just kind of knows really well if you're trying to tap a link versus marking it up. Very well done. It does also have a hand tool too, but I find I don't need to tap it before trying to tap any of the hyperlinks. I think this is an important feature to keep in mind, especially if you're importing textbooks and different files that might contain hyperlinks. Having such a weird or counterintuitive way to simply tap and jump into these hyperlink pages or even external links is just going to slow you down or cause some headache. However, OneNote is the only app that has no true way to click embedded hyperlinks within PDF files. Due to the way the notes are set up in a tabbed notebook, you don't have the ability to traditionally tap hyperlinks and go to a specific page within that PDF. This means you cannot use digital planners or hyperlinked digital notebooks in the way that they're typically used in other apps like GoodNotes and Noteful and Noteshelf and all of that. Instead, you have to actually use a very specific OneNote created style digital planner or just create your own tab notebooks and so on. You can insert PDF files and annotate them within OneNote, but you do lose the hyperlink functionality. which can be really crucial depending on what the file is and what the hyperlinks do and how they serve you within that file that you've added. Now with OneNote, you can link between pages and tabs within the OneNote notebook, but it's quite different than that of embedded hyperlinks in PDF files and anything that you upload to OneNote. And this is one of the ways OneNote kind of just fails for me. I also find it relatively clunky and slow and just has a lot of sync issues in comparison to these more handwritten focused iPad note-taking apps, which just feel faster and lighter. If you're choosing between a note-taking app for your iPad, I imagine handwriting and writing inside the app is obviously extremely important, if not the most important thing to consider when choosing an app. And I have no issues using my Apple Pencil and writing in any of these apps. I feel like my handwriting is virtually the same in all of them. I enjoy the different pen tool options that they all have. They all have their own version of a ball pen or a ballpoint pen, which is going to give you the most consistent and smoothest strokes in handwriting. But some have pencils with pencil textures, fountain style pens for calligraphy, and so on. And in all the apps, you can customize the color and all of that. GoodNotes and FreeNotes even have an additional setting under their pen that allows you to further stabilize your writing. Not something that I see in Notability, Noteshelf, Noteful, or OneNote. But I do find the handwriting engine to be incredible in all of these apps. If I did have to rank them though, I'd probably say GoodNotes and Noteshelf are tied for the top spot, with FreeNotes and Notability not too far behind, and then Noteshelf and OneNote. I just find it not quite as good as the other apps, but it's still a very decent writing experience, and the experience itself is pretty minimal in comparison. One thing that really affects handwriting in any of these apps though is the surface of my iPad screen. I was finding it impossible to write and draw on my iPad while taking notes because the glass felt unnatural and obviously pretty slippery. After I discovered Paperlike, I actually enjoyed taking notes on my iPad again. It's a screen protector that gives you just a bit of friction and resistance, making note-taking and writing feel as natural as pen to paper. The paper feel of the screen protector comes from their nanodot surface technology. It delivers just the right amount of friction you would expect when writing on paper, but it emulates that feeling on your iPad. I waited too long, in my opinion, to give Paperlike a try because installing a screen protector is so nerve-wracking. Because of the dust bubbles and just the alignment of things being off, I just feel like a lot can go wrong with me and a screen protector. Maybe you feel the same way. But now it's even easier to install with Paperlike 3 thanks to their new Butterfly application system. It fixes those issues that you have with installing a screen protector. Your screen isn't exposed to the open air during installation, so you won't get dust bubbles in between cleaning your screen and actually sticking the screen protector on. And there are helper tools and an interactive screen guide to help you get the perfect alignment. So now installing my screen protector goes smoothly the first time, but you do get 2 screen protectors in one pack. Paperlike 3 has been essential in my iPad note-taking setup, and it's the first thing I recommend, especially if you aren't impressed with your handwriting or the feel of writing on iPad. I'll have my link below if you want to check out Paperlike 3. When I was taking notes back in college, I didn't find recording the audio of my lectures very useful, but many students do, and I definitely saw a surge of this feature being added to many note-taking apps that didn't previously have audio recording. Originally, Notability was the only app at the time that had audio recording, so if that was a must-have feature for you, you pretty much had to get Notability. But GoodNotes now has the audio recording ability as well. We also see that feature in OneNote, FreeNotes, and Noteshelf. Literally all of the apps in this video have that feature now, and they more or less do the same thing. Record your audio, allow you to play it back, delete it, all the things. In the same way, a ruler wasn't available in many note-taking apps, but it's a feature being added or updated in many of them. So if you find that you need a ruler in your note-taking app, you won't have to worry with these apps. When it comes to note-taking apps, many of the tools are more or less the same now. One of the biggest differentiators though, aside from just the interface and the aesthetics of the app, is how they are using and incorporating AI features, if at all. GoodNotes is probably the leader in this, in my opinion, as far as being able to ask GoodNotes questions about the notes or files that you have open, generating diagrams, getting math help, summarizing notes, and this can be a pro or con depending on how you feel about AI in academics and so forth. But out of all of these note-taking apps, I will say that none of these AI related features are especially bothersome or in your face and kind of begging you to use them. Sorry, Clippy, you were kind of the original AI. So with AI being introduced in many of these note-taking apps, I think it's best done in GoodNotes in comparison. They are pretty well hidden behind their own icons, and they are easy to ignore if you're not into that. I don't routinely use the AI features in these note-taking apps, so I have no problem with them being in there. We see these features in GoodNotes, and I feel like they're less built out, in my opinion, in Notability and Noteshelf, especially in comparison. Noteshelf and Notability also do have limits on their AI features. FreeNotes has what I can only assume is an AI-based feature because it claims it can help you improve your GPA with the Feynman technique, but it is something you need to upgrade to, which kind of defeats the purpose of FreeNotes being free. And there are other ways that you can use the power of AI for free if you're going to opt into using them to study or quiz yourself on your notes. See, I graduated college long before all of this AI stuff was a big thing, so I can't speak to how any of these features would have affected my note-taking, especially given that all of the information that you do get from AI needs to be verified anyway. But I will say these are features I don't use myself in these apps. So whether something has AI capability or not is not something I personally consider when choosing an iPad note-taking app for the purpose of writing handwritten notes, at least. I have tested and used these features, and I do find them to be well built out and at least well done in terms of other AI slop that I have seen online. So I do think these could be really beneficial to how you might study or review the notes that you take. And it could be a good way to test yourself to make sure it's actually giving you correct information. I do plan on sharing an updated video on the newest features we're seeing added to GoodNotes, but I do find it worth mentioning here in this video because there are features being added that I'm not seeing encompassed in these other note-taking apps, like the text document file type that I mentioned previously, but they also have a new whiteboard feature. Now, if you're familiar with Apple's Freeform app, I find whiteboard in GoodNotes to be pretty similar. There are diagramming tools and sticky notes, and it's a free canvas for mind map brainstorming. You can technically do this in any note-taking app. You can just draw out the arrows and shapes for yourself, but what sets it apart in GoodNotes, besides it being a separate file type, is that these features are editable and interactable, and you can freely zoom in and out and move around on the canvas. There are obviously tons of diagramming and mind mapping apps, but it's their sole function as the app. But in GoodNotes, it's an additional feature, and you can choose the whiteboard file type when you create a new document. GoodNotes also has a study card feature, which isn't a popular feature or capability in other note-taking apps, so a few additional things that sets GoodNotes apart from most other note-taking apps that you'll find on the App Store. These may or may not matter to you, especially if you have other apps that you prefer for mind mapping and brainstorming, or even creating and studying flashcards. But GoodNotes is definitely trying to be an all-in-one app in terms of the features for iPad note-taking and studying and kind of collaboration as a student. So being a student can obviously be quite expensive, especially without considering the massive amount of loans that are just expected of being a student. Apps also cost money to make, to develop, to use, and so the cost to use these apps is obviously extremely important. FreeNotes, of course, being completely free to use with the option of paying a one-time payment of $9.99 to permanently get rid of ads that are in the app, and they also claim that there will be a faster load time when you load up the app. Don't know. OneNote is totally free to download and use as well. They do have subscriptions that you can buy into with it being Microsoft and using Microsoft Copilot, but everything a student would need to take notes on iPad is possible for free within OneNote. So you can absolutely take nice notes on iPad for free, for sure. You'll find the more popular note-taking apps on iPad, however, are paid options, typically with subscriptions now. GoodNotes has a subscription and actually a lifetime payment option, each with their own differences depending on the plan that you choose. And it's the same deal with Notability. Notability does have a free tier to their subscription plans, but you'll notice they lock out popular note-taking features like audio transcription behind a payment plan, and they actually have you buy into higher and higher tiers to unlock more features. Noteshelf does not share their pricing model on their website, unfortunately. I think being transparent is really important, but it seems like you can use Noteshelf for free up to a point or a limit within the app before needing to upgrade to either a weekly, monthly, or yearly premium price. Noteshelf probably has the clearest pricing structure behind our free options, FreeNotes and OneNote, of course, and that's because you can use Noteshelf for free. There might be limits on the certain tools that you can use, or the certain amount of layers that you can have, a certain number of notebooks that you can load up in the app, or you can just pay a one-time payment to get full access of the entire app, which is only $5.99. What's great is that all of these apps do have some way of downloading and trying them out for free, so you have time to test them out and see whether they're actually worth upgrading to or not if you decide to go for a paid note-taking option. When it comes to taking notes on iPad, you have a lot of options to choose from, which can be extremely overwhelming. So download these apps, try them out, give them a go before making your final decision. But I will share what kind of note taker or student I think each app is best suited for. For me, I used GoodNotes all throughout college, and for digital planning, it quickly grew to one of the most popular options for taking notes on iPad, and I think it's easy to see why. They are constantly updating and adding new features, and the GoodNotes team has made it clear that they are prioritizing students and working professionals and what they want out of their note-taking app, with text documents, whiteboard, study cards, and more. GoodNotes is a good option for students looking for an all-in-one solution to taking handwritten notes, to taking typed notes, to mind mapping and group projects and collaborations, and even studying and flashcard creation. I also think GoodNotes is a good choice for beginners on iPad because the interface just is so clean, it's very intuitive, and it's easy to use. Now, OneNote was a note-taking app I was actually required to use for one of my lab courses in my final year of college. They have a class notebook feature that allowed my professors to share a OneNote notebook that he created for us that had lab safety, manuals, procedures, and so on. So OneNote was something I actually used as my lab notebook for diagrams, for the results, for graphs, and so forth. That class was highly technical, and it was very collaborative. So OneNote was the perfect choice for that class, since not every student that we had to collaborate with would have an iPad. We needed an app that had a significant cross-platform capability as far as the operating program and the actual device that you can use the app on, whether it was a tablet, an iPad, a computer, whatever. The other apps will come down to personal preference and wants and needs out of a note-taking app, and how much cross-platform collaboration is needed. Now, FreeNotes is a great option if you want the typical iPad note-taking experience without investing anything at all in achieving such. If you're the kind of student who prefers a simple interface with the essential tools of note-taking, maybe even buying into more of those AI capabilities, Notability and Noteshelf, but especially Notability, are the bigger note-taking apps amongst note takers, especially early note takers on iPad. And I simply love Noteful for the layers and just the ease and the simplicity of the app. If you're a student looking for just a simple no frills approach with a layers feature, we don't see many note-taking apps having that feature, so Noteful is a good option to download and try, and it's very cost effective as well. If you're interested in seeing my full deep dive into all of the new features of GoodNotes, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it. In the meantime, I have an entire playlist on iPad note-taking, tutorials, feature deep dives, tips, tricks, and even more comparisons if you're hoping to go even deeper into each of these apps that I've mentioned. Don't forget to check out Paperlike 3, and I'll see you in the next video. Be sure to let me know in the comments which app you're choosing and why. I would love to know. Till the next one.